Imagine breaking your arm, right? You go to the hospital. They put you in front of the X-ray machine.
Yeah, and it's pretty much instant.
Right. Within minutes, the doctor points to this jagged white line on a glowing screen. And there's a specific comfort in that.
Oh, for sure. You have a clean binary answer.
Yes. It is broken or it is not broken. The problem is visible. It is categorized. But then you step away from the physical body and you try to diagnose the human soul.
And that is a totally different story.
Right. Suddenly that X-ray machine shows absolutely nothing. We try to look at the spiritual condition of humanity, and the diagnostic landscape is, well, it's incredibly murky.
Yeah, it really is.
So, welcome to Reformed Thinking, our deep dive into the texts and ideas that shape faith. Today, we are looking at a rigorous theological analysis of the biblical call to missions.
Which is a heavy topic, but so necessary.
Yeah. We are taking a hard look at how a true understanding of human sin, contrasted with divine holiness, dictates how the church sends workers to the nations.
And we have some fascinating material to work through today. We are pulling from excerpts of Caleb Suko's writing, specifically 2 pieces.
Right. Is God calling me to missions? Do you understand the wretched nature of sin? Is the first one.
Yeah, and the second one is when holy God sends sinful men to the nations. Our anchor for this discussion is the book of Isaiah, specifically the first 8 verses of chapter 6.
Such a famous passage.
It is, and our approach is going to be highly analytical. We need to examine the historical geopolitical crisis of 8th century BC Judah, and we're also going to break down the grammatical mechanics of the original Hebrew text.
To really get at the authorial intent.
Precisely. The goal is to uncover the intent behind the text.
And the mission for this deep dive is to strip away the modern therapeutic illusions of safety that creep into modern evangelicalism.
Which is so common today.
Oh, everywhere. We want to uncover the historical and theological necessity of forensic justification in the missionary call. But to understand the theology, we first have to ground these massive concepts in a specific time and place.
Right, you have to know the history.
Yeah, so we have to travel back to the year 740 BC. The text explicitly anchors itself with a very specific timestamp, in the year that King Uzziah died.
That phrase carries so much weight.
It does. To put you, the listener, in the right headspace, imagine your own country experiencing an unprecedented economic boom. The borders are fortified. You have absolute military supremacy.
Everything feels incredibly safe.
Right. You have lived under this warm blanket of national security for over half a century. And then overnight, you lose your invincible leader.
That historical context is critical for grasping the psychological state of the original audience. I mean, Uzziah's reign lasted for 52 years.
52 years, that's a lifetime.
It is. Think about the generation impact of that timeline. For the vast majority of the population of Judah living at that moment, King Uzziah was the only king they had ever known.
He was just this constant stabilizing fixture in their universe.
Yeah. The historical records detail his administrative genius. Under his rule, agricultural projects flourished across the region. He built towers in the desert and dug out many cisterns because he had large herds.
He loved the soil, as the text said.
He did, but he wasn't just a farmer.
No, the military expansion is what really gave the people that illusion of safety.
Absolutely. He modernized the entire military apparatus. He organized a highly trained standing army of over 300,000 men.
That is massive for that era.
Huge. And he equipped them with shields, spears, helmets, coats of mail, bows, and stones for slinging. And perhaps most notably, he introduced advanced defensive engines in Jerusalem.
Like catapults and things.
Yeah, we're talking about machines designed by skillful men, placed on the towers and the corners of the city walls.
Huh.
They were designed to shoot arrows and hurl large stones at any approaching enemy.
Wow.
Judah had not seen this level of national prestige, innovation, and secure borders since the days of King Solomon.
So there is this massive external prosperity. But as the sources point out, this material blessing acted as a deceptive facade.
It masked a lot of internal rot.
Yeah, it masked a massive spiritual decay within the society. The people looked at their military might, their bustling markets, their impenetrable walls, and they assumed God was giving them a rubber stamp of approval.
They equated material wealth with spiritual health.
Which is a classic mistake. No. But that illusion shatters in 2 Chronicles 26. The tragic reversal comes crashing down. Uzziah's pride swells.
Yeah, he decides his immense political success entitles him to religious authority.
Which is a huge boundary to cross.
He essentially attempts to usurp the Aaronic priesthood. He marches straight into the temple to burn incense on the altar. Now, we have to pause here because to a modern reader, burning incense sounds like a harmless religious gesture.
Like lighting a candle or something.
Right. But the temple operated under strict lethal protocols of holiness. It was not a place for casual visitation. The priests were consecrated specifically to handle the elements of the sanctuary.
By bypassing the priests and attempting to offer the incense himself, Uzziah was violating a very strict boundary,
Yeah, a lethal one.
which gives us a great opportunity to explain the mechanism of Old Testament holiness. It wasn't just arbitrary anger from God. The temple was essentially designed like a spiritual nuclear reactor.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
Yeah, the holiness of God was the radioactive core. The priests were given the specific, divinely ordained shielding, the rituals, the blood sacrifices, the garments, to interact with that core safely.
Right, without that shielding, you don't survive.
And Uzziah, high on his own political success, decides he doesn't need the shielding. He walks right into the reactor.
That is an incredibly accurate way to picture the scenario. He walks in, the priests try to stop him, he becomes enraged at them, and immediately God strikes him with leprosy right there beside the incense altar.
Just instant judgment.
The physical disease breaks out on his forehead. The king who had conquered nations and built war machines is suddenly rendered ceremonially unclean. He is rushed out of the temple and forced into isolated quarantine. He lives the rest of his life completely cut off from society, living in a separate house, while his son Jotham takes over the administration of the palace.
Which creates an immediate, terrifying power vacuum. You have a nation that has relied on this singular strongman for 50 years, and he is suddenly gone. So my question is, how did this sudden internal instability interact with the rising foreign threats of that specific era?
Because the geopolitical map wasn't exactly peaceful at that time.
Right?
The timing is horrifying. At the exact moment Judah loses its invincible king, the Neo-Assyrian Empire is aggressively expanding under the leadership of a ruthless king named Tiglath-Pileser III.
A terrifying figure.
Assyria was not just a neighboring army, it was a brutal expansionist machine. Their military campaigns were characterized by calculated psychological terror.
What kind of things were they doing?
They were known to skin their enemies alive, impale city leaders on stakes outside conquered gates, and deport entire populations to break their national identity.
Oh, wow. So absolute brutality.
Yeah. The geopolitical horizons were growing incredibly dark. Neighboring nations were already being crushed under the Assyrian boot.
Yet, despite this massive external threat looming on the horizon, Judah remained completely blinded by their own religious routines. The sources describe their condition as covenantal, formalistic ritualism.
They were still going to church, so to speak.
Yeah.
They were scrupulously offering the Levitical sacrifices. They maintained the liturgical prayers. They visited the temple courts on the required feast days.
Going through all the motions.
But they had successfully decoupled their outward religious performance from any inward reality. They were outwardly compliant with the liturgy while remaining inwardly corrupt.
They assumed their physical descent from Abraham and their possession of the temple building guaranteed their safety against Assyria.
Which was a fatal miscalculation.
I love the specific phrase the sources use for this condition, billboard blindness.
Oh, that's a great concept.
Think about your daily commute to work, The first time you drive past a massive, brightly lit billboard, it catches your eye. You read the slogan.
Right.
But after driving past that exact same sign every single day for 6 months, your brain completely filters it out. You do not even see it anymore. It becomes background noise.
It just fades into the scenery.
Yeah. The sources argue that routine religious attendance and simple behavioral modifications create a spiritual version of billboard blindness. You get so used to the routine of hearing about grace, singing the songs, performing the rituals, that you become entirely numb to the actual horror of sin.
You mistake your own civil decency for radical holiness.
And that disconnect between outward ritual and inward reality is the specific target of the author here.
We see this dynamic mapped out perfectly in the literary structure of the book itself. The author does not just tell us the people are blind, he structures the text to force the reader to confront that blindness.
Which brings up a massive point of debate among scholars regarding the placement of chapter 6. Because when you read it, chapter 6 contains Isaiah's dramatic call to ministry.
Yes, the commissioning scene.
A lot of critical scholars look at the manuscript and argue that someone must have scrambled the scrolls over time. They argue that chapter 6 is misplaced and belongs at the very beginning of the book.
The critical assumption is often that ancient texts are haphazardly assembled, like they just threw pieces together.
Wait.
But reading the text as a cohesive canonical design reveals a brilliant, highly intentional structure. Chapters 1 through 5 function as a devastating prosecuting brief against the nation of Judah.
God is laying out the specific charges before he ever introduces the prophet's personal commission.
Exactly. The prosecution does not hold back. God is laying out an airtight legal case. The sources detail the Song of the Vineyard found in Isaiah chapter 5.
Such a tragic agricultural metaphor.
It is. God describes planting a vineyard on a fertile hill. He clears it of stones, plants choice vines, builds a watchtower in the middle of it, and hews out a wine vat.
He gives the vineyard every possible advantage to produce good fruit.
Every advantage. But when the harvest comes, the vineyard yields wild, poisonous grapes. And the text explicitly defines those wild grapes as injustice, oppression, and bloodshed.
And then the legal brief continues with 6 terrifying woes pronounced against the society. Isaiah stands as the prosecuting attorney, pointing his finger at specific cultural sins.
He calls down judgment on the greedy land grabbers who hoard real estate.
Joining house to house and adding field to field until there's no room left for anyone else.
Yeah, he calls out the drunkards who chase strong drink from early morning until late at night. He condemns the cynics who mock God, demanding that God hurry up and show his work so they can see it.
And he specifically calls out the people who literally swap moral categories, the ones who call evil good and good evil.
Who put darkness for light and light for darkness.
Right. For 5 entire chapters, Isaiah is the righteous, finger-pointing prosecutor. He is standing in the courtroom, laying out the undeniable guilt of his peers.
He is the moral compass of the nation.
Calling out everyone else's corruption. But then, the page turns to chapter 6. And the camera suddenly flips.
The shift is violently sudden. The prophet, who has spent 5 chapters pronouncing all these woes upon his corrupt society, is suddenly brought into the immediate presence of Yahweh of hosts.
And in a fraction of a second, the prosecutor becomes the defendant.
Notice what he does not do. He doesn't look at God and say, Lord, look at all these terrible people we have to deal with down here. Look at the drunkards and the land grabbers.
But he doesn't point the finger anymore.
He looks at the throne, and his immediate visceral reaction is to cry out, woe is me.
That implication is staggering for you listening right now. Isaiah was arguably the most morally upright human being in the entire nation of Judah.
He was the prophet. He was the truth teller.
He was the one fighting for justice. Yet, the moment his life is measured against absolute divine holiness, he stands completely condemned. His relative human righteousness is exposed as totally insufficient.
That literary progression is highly intentional. The external horizontal sins of the society detailed in chapters 1 through 5 are just symptoms of a deeper disease.
Right.
The vision in chapter 6 exposes the vertical reality, the radical corruption of the human heart before a perfectly holy God. The structure forces the reader to realize that before Isaiah can be sent to prophesy to a broken nation, he has to realize he is part of the brokenness.
But this isn't just a clever literary device for the reader. Isaiah's reaction in the text, this total implosion, is a physiological response to the sensory overload of the temple.
Oh, the imagery is overwhelming.
The text gives us these huge physical details of the vision. He sees the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. The train of his robe fills the entire temple space.
The thresholds of the massive doors are literally shaking.
And the house is filling with thick smoke. The sources point out that this specific imagery echoes the classic Sinaitic theophany.
Right. A theophany is a visible manifestation of God to humankind. The smoke and the shaking ground immediately recall the terrifying presence of God descending on Mount Sinai when the law was given to Moses.
It's meant to be terrifying.
An environment is engineered to convey absolute, unapproachable supremacy. And attending this throne are the seraphim.
Let's talk about them for a second.
The Hebrew word seraphim literally translates to burning ones. These are angelic beings, and they are calling out to one another with what is known as the trisagion.
The superlative Hebrew triplication of the word holy. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.
Let's break down why that repetition matters, because in English, we might just use bold font or an exclamation point to emphasize a word.
Or write in all caps, yeah.
But in Hebrew syntax, there is no comparative or superlative form of an adjective built into the word itself like we have in English with holy, holier, holiest.
So how do they express it?
To elevate a concept, you repeat it. To say something is holy, holy is to say it is supremely holy. But to repeat a word 3 times is the ultimate superlative. It is the highest possible elevation of a concept in the Hebrew language.
Wow.
It is reserved exclusively for the holiness of God. The root word here is quadosh. It denotes absolute qualitative otherness and moral purity.
So it's not just that God is really, really good.
No, God's holiness is not just a heightened version of human goodness. It is a completely different category of existence.
I want to ask about a specific detail regarding those seraphim. The text says each one has 6 wings. With 2 they fly, but with 2 they cover their faces, and with 2 they cover their feet.
Right.
If these are sinless heavenly creatures who have never rebelled against God, why are they using their wings to shield themselves in this environment?
It goes back to that nuclear reactor analogy you used earlier. The supreme majesty of God requires absolute reverence, even from unfallen, sinless creatures.
Even the angels need shielding.
The burning angels veil themselves because the sheer radiance of God's unmitigated holiness is overpowering. They cover their feet as a sign of creaturely humility, acknowledging the vast difference between the Creator and the created.
That really puts things in perspective.
If sinless beings must cover their faces in trembling adoration, it makes the casual flippancy of fallen human beings highly inappropriate. It completely dismantles any notion of a seeker-sensitive, trivialized approach to the divine.
Which perfectly explains why Isaiah absolutely loses his mind in verse 5. He sees this environment, he hears the shaking of the doors, and he screams, "Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts."
Let's perform a linguistic breakdown of that cry, because the English translation softens the blow of what Isaiah is actually experiencing.
Yeah, woe is me almost sounds a bit melodramatic in modern English.
It does, but the Hebrew exclamation he uses is oi, which translates to woe. It is a prophetic declaration of doom. It is the exact same word he just spent chapter 5 hurling at the corrupt society.
Oh, wow. So he's cursing himself.
He turns the prophetic curse upon himself, and the verb he uses for I am lost is nidmeti.
What is the mechanical function of that specific verb?
It is the nephal perfect of the root dama. In Hebrew grammar, the nephal stem denotes a passive or reflexive voice.
Okay.
It means to be structurally ruined, cut off, or forced into silence. Isaiah isn't just saying, I feel guilty. He is saying, I am being undone. He is hitting a structural self-destruct button.
He's falling apart at the seams.
He is being passively ruined by the sheer weight of what he is looking at. And he immediately identifies himself with the ceremonial term tame, which means unclean or defiled.
Which is a heavy word in that culture.
It is the exact same word a leper would have to shout when walking through a crowd.
And he zeroes in specifically on his mouth. I am a man of unclean lips. The sources make a brilliant connection here to the New Testament, specifically drawing a line to Luke 6.45, where Jesus says that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
The Greek word used in Luke for abundance is parasema. It describes a boiling over, a surplus that violently floods out of a container because it can no longer be held back.
Like a dam breaking.
Think of the lips as the spillway of the heart's reservoir. The water that spills over the dam is the exact same water that is held in the lake.
Right.
If the water spilling over the lips is unclean, it is an infallible diagnostic proof that the massive reservoir of the heart is a factory of corruption.
The outward speech perfectly diagnoses the inward depravity.
Hmm.
Isaiah isn't confessing to a minor speech impediment or saying he occasionally uses bad language. By indicting his lips, he is confessing a totally corrupted human nature.
Yes. The lips are just the most visible evidence of the internal rot. He realizes that his core nature is entirely incompatible with the burning holiness he is currently witnessing.
And what stands out to me is how completely paralyzed he is by this diagnosis. He possesses no human resource to fix his condition.
None at all.
He can't scrub his own lips clean. He can't offer a quick prayer to balance the scales. He requires an intervention from completely outside of himself.
Which leads us right into the mechanical grammar of verses 6 and 7 describing the cleansing.
Yeah, Isaiah stands entirely frozen. He does not reach for the coal. He does not assist the angel in any way. The cleansing is entirely passive on his part.
That passive grammar is essential. It demolishes 2 specific theological errors that are highly prevalent today, which the sources specifically mention.
Pelagianism and Arminianism.
Yes.
Wait, I need to jump in here because these are heavy terms, and they deal with concepts that modern listeners often push back against.
They absolutely do.
The idea that a human being has zero part in their own rescue offends modern sensibilities. We like to think we have free will, that we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
It is a natural human reaction to want to retain some credit for our salvation. Pelagianism is an ancient heresy that argues the human heart is essentially a neutral tablet.
Like a blank slate.
Right. It suggests that humans are completely capable of choosing righteousness and cleaning themselves through sheer moral willpower.
Which Isaiah clearly couldn't do.
No. And then Arminianism, while acknowledging the reality of the fall and the need for grace, still clings to the idea of a cooperative human will.
So God does his part, we do our part.
It suggests that God offers the grace, but the human must initiate the process by choosing to accept it. But the text of Isaiah 6 shows something entirely different. It shows monergism in action.
Let's break down the mechanics of monergism.
Monergism is the theological concept that salvation is entirely a sovereign, unmerited divine action. The prefix mono means one, and ergon means work.
One worker.
God acts alone to save a sinner who is incapable of saving himself. Isaiah literally does nothing in this scene. He just stands there, ruined. A seraph flies to him. The action is entirely initiated and completed by heaven.
Let's look at the specific physical instruments of this divine pardon. The angel uses tongs to take a burning coal, which in Hebrew is ritzpah, from the altar, the mizbeach.
The elements are highly symbolic and carry massive theological weight. The altar is the place of sacrifice. It is the place where blood is shed to satisfy justice.
And what happens when the coal touches him?
When the angel touches the blood-soaked burning coal to Isaiah's lips, a forensic transaction occurs. The angel declares, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for."
A forensic transaction, meaning a legal exchange has taken place.
Precisely. The Hebrew word for guilt is avon, which refers to the heavy liability or the punishment due for wrongdoing.
The debt, basically.
The word for sin is chatat, referring to the offense itself, the missing of the mark. To be atoned for comes from the root kafar, meaning to cover, to appease, or to propitiate.
So it's a complete wipe of the record.
Notice the incredible reversal happening here. The burning holiness of the altar, which by all rights should completely consume the unholy sinner standing before it, instead consumes his sin.
Oh, wow.
The fire purifies instead of destroys because it comes from the altar of sacrifice.
That is a staggering image. But we have to push the theological timeline forward. A strictly Old Testament reading leaves the picture incomplete. How do we know who Isaiah is actually looking at? Because this isn't just a generic blurry vision of heaven.
No, it is highly specific, and the New Testament leaves no ambiguity about it. The Apostle John, in his Gospel, specifically in John 12.41, references this exact vision.
What does John say?
John writes, "Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him." And in the context of John 12, the him is referring directly to Jesus.
So Isaiah saw the glory of the pre-incarnate second person of the Trinity.
He is looking at Jesus Christ sitting on the throne.
That changes everything about how you read the passage.
Yes. The majestic, terrifying, holy king that causes the temple to shake is the pre-incarnate Christ. And we can connect the altar in Isaiah's vision directly to the historical reality of Calvary.
The cross.
The coal, saturated in the essence of blood sacrifice, represents penal substitutionary atonement.
Break down how that substitution works mechanically.
On the cross, the perfect Lamb of God bore the terrifying fire of divine judgment. The wrath of God against sin was poured out on Christ.
He took the hit.
He satisfied the legal demands of divine justice. He took the punishment so that the sinner wouldn't have to. So when the coal touches Isaiah's lips in the vision, it is a visual, prophetic representation of Christ's righteousness and sacrificial death being applied to a ruined sinner.
The guilt is removed because the penalty has been paid on the altar.
And only after this objective forensic cleansing is applied can the prophet actually hear the voice of God.
The sequence is absolute.
He is ruined by the vision, he is redeemed by the altar, and then the call comes. Verse 8, "And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send and who will go for us?'"
And Isaiah responds immediately, "Here am I, send me." Or in the original Hebrew, hinenge.
It is vital to recognize the emotional state of that response. His response is the joyful, unhindered overflow of a justified soul. It is not an act of self-determination.
He isn't volunteering out of a sense of arrogant confidence.
It is not some romantic summons to a foreign adventure. He goes willingly and urgently because he has been thoroughly pardoned. He knows the terror of the judgment, and he knows the relief of the grace.
Which forces us to connect this ancient commission to how the church operates today. I want to address you, the listener, directly, because the sources issue a very strict warning against a modern epidemic, the danger of substituting the Great Commission with a purely humanitarian social gospel.
This is a huge point of contention today.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate for a second, because this is where modern listeners might get incredibly uncomfortable. The text explicitly says that digging wells, building medical clinics, and providing food are beautiful, common grace expressions of Christian love.
They absolutely are.
Jesus healed the sick. He fed the hungry. So why do the sources argue that these activities fail as the primary missionary call? To a modern ear, saying that building a medical clinic is a secondary issue sounds incredibly harsh.
It sounds harsh until you understand the eternal stakes of the theology we just mapped out. The sources are arguing from the premise that humanity's most fatal disease is unremitted sin, not physical poverty.
Okay, unpack that.
Let's be unequivocally clear. Bodily suffering is a grievous reality in a fallen world, and Christians are absolutely called to alleviate it. Compassion is a non-negotiable fruit of the Spirit.
Right, you can't just ignore suffering.
However, if you zoom out and look at the eternal timeline, a cleaner village filled with unforgiven sinners still faces the terrifying divine judgment that made Isaiah scream, "Woe is me."
The physical relief is temporary.
Yeah.
The spiritual condition is eternal.
Exactly. The primary motivation for missions must be preaching the forensic justification of a ruined sinner through the blood of Christ.
So if you provide clean water to a community, but withhold the message of the cross, you have missed the core of the commission.
You have treated the symptom while ignoring the terminal cancer? The true missionary call is not just to improve the living conditions of the world, but to declare how a holy God has made a way to pardon guilty rebels.
Which brings a massive ecclesiastical application to the table. Local churches have a heavy responsibility here.
They really do.
They must verify their missionaries using objective biblical qualifications. They shouldn't be sending people just because a young person has a restless desire to travel or a vague, undefined sense of compassion for the poor.
The vetting process must be rigorous. Churches must send workers who have personally wrestled with the depravity of their own hearts, who have been crushed by the weight of the holiness of God, and who have found their absolute, unshakable security in the atonement.
If a missionary candidate has not experienced the sequence of Isaiah 6 ruin followed by redemption, they have no message to carry to the nations.
To summarize that dynamic clearly, a person who only sees human physical need may become an excellent philanthropist.
And the world needs philanthropists.
But a person who sees divine holiness, human guilt, and atoning grace becomes a herald. They become a true missionary. They carry the only needs that can actually save a soul from the fire.
That is the distinction the sources are fighting to preserve. Philanthropy is horizontal. It deals with man-to-man relationships.
The gospel is vertical. It reconciles dead men to a holy God.
Let's recap the distinct logical flow dictated by the text, because the sequence we have walked through today is everything. You cannot bypass the step.
They have to happen in order.
Revelation of God's absolute holiness leads to the complete ruin of human pride. That structural ruin leads to the desperate, passive need for redemption. And that objective, blood-bought redemption leads to a passionate surrender to the mission.
And we must offer a final, intensely practical application from the sources here. You do not need an airplane ticket or a stamped passport to apply this text to your life.
No, it starts right at home.
The call to speak to your next-door neighbors, your family members, and your co-workers with urgency requires the exact same foundational grasp of holiness and grace.
If you cannot look at your own city, your own neighborhood, and understand their desperate need for Christ, flying across an ocean to a different continent will not magically change your perspective.
The mission field is wherever you are currently standing.
Which brings us right back to where we started today. We talked about how we crave the clean binary of an X-ray, the visible, undeniable proof of what is broken. But the spiritual reality is far more invasive. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder as you go about your week.
It's a challenging thought.
We established earlier, through Isaiah's reaction and through the Gospel of Luke, that your daily casual vocabulary is the infallible diagnostic tool of your heart's hidden reservoir. It is the spillway.
The words you speak reveal the actual condition of your nature.
So if that is true for the words you speak out loud, consider this. What would a transcript of your private, unspoken thoughts this past week reveal to a perfectly holy God?
Wow. That's heavy.
If every judgment, every lust, every arrogant assumption, and every bitter grievance was printed on a page and held up against the blazing purity of the throne room we saw in Isaiah 6, how would you fare?
Not well.
The diagnostic x-ray of your soul isn't murky to him. It's blindingly clear. He sees the reservoir.
He sees everything.
The only question that remains is whether you are standing in your own fragile, temporary righteousness, or if your lips have been touched by the burning coal from the altar of Christ.